Welcome to the Lights On Show. I'm your host, Jacob Morissette, and this is the podcast about self-development. Now, before I get any further, this is going to be, kind of a new series I want to introduce into the show. Now, obviously, the majority of the episodes that are going to be posted are going to be interviews or me talking about philosophical ideas with some certain point that I want to try to hit in that episode. And these are going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to title these Book Talks, and a basic name because it's for a basic purpose. In this series, I want to go through some of the books that I've read and showcase them to you guys, because although they are books, this is still a self-development type podcast, and these books are all about self-development and growing yourselves and learning things from other people's stories that, frankly, I find very helpful and have helped me in my success of my life. So the first book that I ended up reading is a little book. Like, literally, it is very small. It is a very small format, and it's only about 84 or 80-something pages. And it is The Dip, a little book that teaches you when to quit and when to stick. And it is by Seth Godin. Seth Godin is also very popular from his best-selling book called The Purple Cow and Small is the New Big. So he's not very famous, but he's pretty well known, and he's really big in the self-development field. So I highly recommend any of his books, but more specifically, this book. This book is super short and sweet. It, like it says, it's a little book that teaches you one certain concept, almost like my podcast episodes. They teach one certain concept. And obviously, since the things I learned are from this book, I can't do a whole episode and claim that's mine. So I'm going to do this instead, kind of, like I said, this book talk type of thing. And I think it's going to work out great. So in the front cover of the book, because I have the hardback, so it has like the little plastic sheath on it that has the description and all that other mumbo jumbo stuff on it, but highlighted in blue, which means it's very important, he says, the old saying is wrong. Winners do quit and quitters do win, right? It's pretty bold, pretty out there. And for me, at least, it's really intriguing to want to make me read the rest of the book, which I did. I actually read this book in a whole day, and I recommend this book not only because of the lessons that it shares, but the fact that it's such a good introduction to this idea of self-development and this idea of understanding new philosophical ideas and content, because it is tiny. I read it in a couple hours. And I was mind blown the entire time. And this definitely helped jumpstart my world of self-development and thinking of bigger ideas. So just to kind of run down this book, he talks a lot about the dip. So that's the title of the book, right? The Dip. And I'm going to be sure to showcase the actual cover and like what the book physically looks like, so people can obviously have a physical understanding of what it looks like without just having to hear my voice about it. So I'm going to be posting those to my Twitter at @lights_show, which is partly the reason why it's so important to follow me on that social medium. So, but he talks about the dip, and if you guys check out the picture I'm going to post on Twitter, you'll understand. But the dip is exactly as it sounds. It's like a roller coaster dip, right? We start at a high level, and it goes down and then back up. And how that relates to the book is he describes day-to-day tasks, or he describes it as any important task that's worth doing most likely has a dip. And when he describes it, he says that when we're starting a task, for example, if you're an artist, you like drawing, or I think a perfect example that I can relate with really well is this podcast, is that I start out with a whole bunch of hype. I think I talked about this in a previous episode, or maybe not. I don't know when I'm going to release this, but I talk about how when I first started thinking of this idea of creating the Lights On show, it was all a bunch of hype. I had a bunch of adrenaline going through my brain, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's that top level of the dip that he's talking about. When we're super high in ourselves and we have a whole bunch of ego, a whole bunch of pride, and we have lots of confidence. And then we start doing it. We get the first couple episodes rolling. We're still super excited. We still have that same pump. And then as we continue to go, we go down the roller coaster, right? But just like in the basic law of physics, if you start at one level and then you go down, you're not going to be at that same level again. Like, you're going to need more effort in order to continue to push yourself back up top. So how this relates to the dip and how it relates to my podcast is I start at the top, or I start at a pretty high level, and then as I'm continually going, I hit this dip, and I roll down a hill, basically. And that hill is going to be some sort of learning gap that I'm going to have to hit in order to see this podcast grow and become successful, because that second uphill that we go up on, that is success, or that is the financial success, or that's achieving your goal, or any of that type of stuff. But in order to hit that hill, you have to go through the dip, which in thinking of it like gravitationally, it's where you're being held down and you just can't move very well because you just don't have the motivation or because something's really hard. And so he talks about how every task that's worth doing has a dip. Now, this dip, just like if you're trying to think of it like a roller coaster, in order to get out of the dip, you have to exert more energy or more force to put that roller coaster train back on top of another hill. And so when we're doing our day-to-day task, or when we're doing a task that's worth it, the dip is more of a mental fatigue or a mental challenge we have to overcome. So in this book, he describes so well in depth and really puts the pen to the paper and puts a mental picture, because he does use a lot of pictures in this book as well to help describe different dips or describe different scenarios that we play in our lives that are worth or are not worth a dip. And it's really neat how he does that, and it brings a lot of attention to the tasks we do on a day-to-day basis, like just hobbies that we do in general. And I think this goes to the next point I want to hit, but he helps us to understand when we should stick to something or when we should quit it. And he uses that saying or that phrase and ties it together with his concept of the dip, the physical, or like the physical dip, but we put it obviously mentally in our brains, that dip, and he helps us to tie those two together. And just to sum it up real quick though, but he says that the dip is a hard thing to get through, and it takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a lot of resources that us as humans have to give, whether that be money, time, mental capacity, or really anything that any person has to give. In order to get out of the dip and become successful or happy in something, you have to put a lot into it. And I think we hear that a lot. You get in when you get out, right? But the dip kind of puts it in a better picture. So anyways, with the whole point of learning to quit and when to stick, he relates that to the hobbies or like to the activities that we do in our normal lives. For example, if people want to start being a photographer, or they want to become a snowboarder, or they want to do any normal hobby that any normal person would have, RC cars, podcasting, like myself, being a full-time student, he helps us to put a plan on those things and to think about the dip and what the dip is going to need before we even start it. Being able to understand that helps us to better prioritize our lives. I'll just give an example from my life that I used right after I finished reading this book, and something that helped me, just so that way it can kind of solidify in you guys' minds what this kind of means. So my stepdad and my stepbrother are quite involved in snowboarding, and they like it a lot, and they always invite me to go. And I used to go with them a couple times. I never have been good at snowboarding. I mean, it's fun, and I like being out in the snow, and like the whole environment is really cool, and like the people are really nice and everything like that. But after reading this book, I was able to realize that not to be rude or anything like that, or not to be rude to them, or not to downplay what snowboarding means to people who enjoy it, but it's not worth my time. And people usually feel bad whenever they say that that's not worth my time, and that's not worth whatever sacrifices I have to give into it. People always feel like that's a really snotty and kind of selfish way to think about it. And it is, but it's useful. And it actually is very meaningful and helpful. So back to the story. But after reading this book, I reevaluated my, I guess, stupid snowboarding career. And I said, okay, I have a lot of fun with this, but I don't want to really get invested in this. And it's too hard for me to get out of that dip in order to find real happiness in it. Like I don't really care about it that much to put in that amount of effort. So I quit it. And by quitting snowboarding or just not doing it, it freed up time to allow me to set up more effort and more time and more, I guess, of my resources as a student into things that I do want to go through the dip with, like school. Like school has a huge learning curve. I think another example that really helps to bring this to mind is a learning curve. So the dip is kind of like a learning curve. But school has a huge dip. When we first start in kindergarten, we're like, yeah, we get to learn ABCs, we get to do all this stuff, we get to meet new friends, play with toys and everything like that. And then we hit a huge dip. And that's all through grade school, middle school, high school, junior high, it doesn't matter. We hit a huge dip where we kind of hate it, we struggle, and do those things. But for a student as myself, I've seen that because of the amount of effort that I'm putting into it, I've gotten to the point where I've gotten past the educational dip. And now everything I do in school actually is quite fun. And I feel very happy in doing it. I feel very fulfilled in my life. And it has helped me to create the person I am now. And that's kind of a stupid example with snowboarding and everything like that. But it's even like the simple things that matter when it comes to picking what dips you want to go through and what dips that you don't want to go through. And this is just supposed to be a short conversation that I have with you guys, just to kind of introduce a book that helped change my life. And if this book seems kind of interesting to you, I highly recommend you pick it up. It's, I think, like $15 on Amazon, and I know it's kind of a lot of money to ask for such a small book that physically is small and does not have that much information in it. But I highly recommend it nonetheless, or rent it from a library, or try to find the e-version of it, although I read a different book that talked about why ebooks aren't very good, but doesn't matter. If you're able to fully invest 2 hours of your day to read this book, I have no doubt that it can help you reprioritize your life and allow you to find more fulfillment in those things that you find you like more, such as me and my schooling. And as for this is just kind of like the first episode of this. I don't really know what to do or anything. I think it's just going to consist of short conversations that I have reviewing a book, talking about the main concepts in it, and then obviously I'll post the covers and kind of take some product photography of them and put it on the Twitter page. I think I'll just do that. But if you guys have any input on what maybe you'd like to hear later, maybe you want me to actually read the front and back covers of them, let me know. And on Twitter, on DM me, or yeah, that would be great. And also, if you like this episode and it brings some joy to your life, please be sure to drop a rating on or a comment on any platform that you're listening on, whether it be iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play. Be greatly appreciated. And also follow me on Twitter, because like I said, I think this podcast is going to be highly involved in my Twitter page and the community there. So please follow me at Twitter at lights_show. Hope you enjoyed this first episode of the Book Talks. And this is the book, The Dip by Seth Godin. Goodbye.